Okay, it's telling me to refresh the page. I'll be right back.
Oh, no.
What do we do now? There we go.
Hey, I don't have any idea what my password is to your website.
Okay.
Check. Okay, I'm back.
I've been sitting on that email for a couple of days. I want to see.
Oh, you know what? It's in the newsletter.
It's in the newsletter that we're live, and that
we are live,
and we're old men who need help, password recovery help. But we're here to help you recover the password to win your league. Dr. Jene Bramel, Matt Walden, Sigmund Bloom here. It's an exciting time. You can feel the energy of the fantasy football world really focused. Drafts this weekend, drafts next weekend, third preseason week, which isn't as important as it used to be. And Dr. Jene, let's jump right in. It's not as important as it used to be, and it may become even less important after teams see what happened to Cam Newton tonight. Can you tell us from your trained eye what happened to Cam Newton tonight?
Hopefully he just jammed his foot up a little bit. But he did take a really funny step. He kind of jammed that left foot into the ground, stepping into the pocket, and then seeing the pocket close down and trying to jump back. And when he did that, he didn't put his foot back down on the ground, which makes you a little bit nervous. I'm not going to speculate on what it may or may not be. Hopefully we find out that just out of an abundance of precaution, they've pulled him, and it's not something to be more concerned about tomorrow. Wasn't a particularly violent mechanism, but that doesn't mean that there's not a meaningful injury here. But as we so often do, it's best to wait to see what the team has to say, and hopefully we'll get an update from the Panthers and Rivera or Newton himself after the game, if not tomorrow and then through the weekend.
All right, so we have the ongoing Kalen Ballage or Ballage. I don't know how do you pronounce it anymore.
Ballage.
Maybe it's the Ballage when he's doing well. Yes,
it's like a French dessert, It's
Ballage when he's not doing so great. So you have that, and you have Kenyon Drake with the right foot injury. Nothing big, it seems like, but can you kind of illuminate what's going on with that injury for those of us who think we're smarter than the Miami Dolphins and think that Ballage is for Ballage, or whatever, and Drake is the guy to go with?
Yeah, I don't think there's anything specific. Miami's, I think, they've gone out of their way to tell us, Brian Flores, to tell us, kind of like Bill O'Brien did last week, that they're not going to have a lot to say about these injuries. The walking boot came off of Kenyon Drake today or yesterday, I'm not sure which, but reassuringly so. So hopefully they were just looking for a little bit of a mobilization. It means shouldn't be a super long-term injury. They've not really said whether or not they expect him back for week one definitively just yet. But the fact that the walking boot's off and they're planning to accelerate his rehab a little bit is reassuring. But this is the week. So we're getting through this preseason game, and then players really need to be getting prepared for week one. They have to be doing something that tells the team that they can game plan and prepare with them in mind for the week one games. And so that's going to include Drake. If we don't see him doing much in practice this week, then we need to be concerned. But the fact that the walking boot's off, hopefully find that that's a reassuring thing as we go.
Dr. Jene, Brandon Standifer in the chat room says, did Dr. Jene ever see someone get injured and think, crap, my Twitter is about to blow up? Look, the real question, I'll ask you the real question. And some of this is just to go back, and even, Jene, you're such a patient person that maybe you're going to say exactly what you said a week ago or 2 weeks ago, or exactly what you said in your Monday injury rounds. Subscribers, you want this. Tell us, and the beat writers, guys like Stephen Holder. Stephen Holder is an excellent beat writer. Every now and then, Stephen Holder will have these candid moments like, this is how much Frank Reich cares about preseason. He doesn't, sorry, Joe, give a sorry, Joe, about the preseason, right? So he's trying to get to the bottom of this Andrew Luck thing. Other people are trying to get to the bottom of it. Just give us that. What you did a great job breaking this down, like what we know, what we don't know, how that affects how we view Andrew Luck in the short and long term.
Yeah, we keep getting little bits of information, but I don't think it really ought to push us one way or the other. I think that the important things that I feel like we know are that, one, what the Colts originally thought this injury was and what Luck originally thought this injury was doesn't appear to be the case. And as of last report with Chris Ballard's press conference, the Colts weren't certain that they found the answer, even though they thought they did. And we haven't really heard that much more about it. Frank Reich continues to say in different ways the same thing. He's having difficulty moving laterally. He's still having pain. His return to the field is going to be based on pain and mobility more than anything else. And we continue to see Luck, at least on the practice field, even though he's not been cleared for practice, for a contact practice, for team drills. They're allowing him to do individual drills, which suggests that he's far enough along in his rehab that they want to continue to push him to do football-specific activities, but he's not cleared to practice. So, and again, we're butting up against this all-important time. Frank Reich basically said what we've been saying for a couple of weeks, which is, in order for me to feel comfortable with him playing in week 1, he has to be on the practice field by now. And I know we're probably going to grow more and more frustrated with the preseason this year and in future years, but this is not new. Teams, with rare exception, are going to put their players in harm's way unless they really, really feel like they need to. I'm kind of surprised to see Tom Brady play as much as he is today, and other teams have done the same thing. If there's anything unusual with Cam Newton's foot, if this keeps him out in any way in the regular season, you're going to see even more teams say, enough is enough. Can we get enough done? We're not hitting during the preseason anyway. Can we get these guys ready enough in football-related activity to play for week 1 without doing a lot in preseason games? And anytime they're on the field, they're at risk. And there's, as we talked about last week, these guys have to get in some sort of football-related shape. But that's what Frank Reich has told us. So I don't think there's anything new here. And the deadline is still going to be, we need to be doing something this week so we know he can prepare for week 1. And I don't know if we're there yet. Andrew Luck has said, although he's been frustrated about the questions he's been getting, he has said from the beginning that he feels like he can play through this. So you would think then that at some point you're going to see him begin to practice. We get through this weekend, we see him start to do a little bit more next week, and hopefully he gets clearance, and then we have that answer. But until then, I'm not sure. I still feel like, based on what we heard from Chris Ballard and the fact that we haven't seen Andrew Luck in now almost a month do anything on the practice field, you have to consider him questionable for week 1. And then it becomes a little bit of a not really sure where we are with him. Is it a week-to-week situation, or is it a little bit more open-ended? And we'll find that out as we go along. I think, as Chris Mortensen had said, there's reason for some guarded optimism, but he's got to be on the practice field. And if that's not happening by early next week, then we're looking at week 1 and then maybe beyond.
I think beyond is a good word for Chad Kelly. So we'll leave it at that and go on to Amari Cooper. How is the heel injury that's going on there? You said it's confirmed that he had plantar fascia. Should we be concerned about that?
And then there was another report today that maybe he's got a muscle bruise of some sort, kind of intrinsic muscle bruise. And, the anatomy of there, are we going to call it connective tissue? We're going to call it plantar fascia. We're going to call it a muscle, all those sorts of things. I think somewhere around the heel, he's got some inflammation. Whether it started as a bruise and turned into something a little bit more than that or not is hard to know. I think the most reassuring thing we've heard about Cooper is that he said he's dealt with something very similar to this in the past, played through it without much difficulty. Now, you never want a wide receiver to have issues with the foot or ankle. Those, it's so important. We talked about this with Antonio Brown. It's so important for him to be able to stop, start, get out of breaks, and finish a game. But Cooper seems optimistic. There's not been anything from the Cowboys that suggests he's not going to be ready to go. It's another player that there's no reason to risk putting him out on the practice field or in a preseason game to put himself at risk of a little bit of an aggravation. So you may as well not put a player in harm's way until you absolutely have to. So I'm pretty optimistic he'll be available for week 1. I'm not too worried about his effectiveness, but again, practice participation is going to tell the tale on him over the next 7 to 10 days.
Okay. I never go ahead. I never back. I'm falling asleep in my director's chair. Go ahead.
I was wondering. I wasn't sure whether you were there or not, but I'll just go a twofer and say let's go with another wide receiver. And DK Metcalf, everyone, a lot of people's favorite, mid-draft lottery ticket option, paired up with Russell Wilson. Arthroscopic knee surgery. I mean, what should we looking at for here? Is this a guy that we want to be drafting now, or is he someone that we should be leaving alone?
I think it depends on where he is in your draft. He was an upside play always, right? I mean, we're not looking for 140 targets and 75 catches and buckets and buckets of production out of him necessarily. He's going to be somebody that has big weeks for you. And then, maybe depending on what goes on with that offense, maybe does a little bit more consistency over the course of the season. So got some good news with him today where, the Seahawks are suggesting that there wasn't much concern found during the scope. They didn't find as much as they thought they could have. That was the implication there. I don't know that puts the 2-week time frame as far as him returning to practice next week, well, in advance of week 1 anyway, and playing or not. We have seen certain players go in for a knee scope leading into a bye week, practice a little bit coming out of the bye week, and then play without missing much time. But that's really rare. Even though it happens, to count on a 2.5 week timetable is a concern. And I think the Seahawks sort of hinted at that a little bit when they said, had this been found and reported, it's hard to say whether or not it was a diagnostic issue or something that Metcalf tried to play through the week before, and they got a jump start of 5 to 6 additional days on it, that week 1 would have been a little bit more on the table. But I think we're probably looking at week 2, week 3. Again, this is a situation where, why are we going to rush this? Week 1 may not be critical. DK Metcalf is going to play a very defined role in our offense, but there are other players that can probably do at least run those routes, not to the extent and success that Metcalf may be able to. We need to make sure that those stabilizing muscles are recovered, that there's no residual inflammation in the knee, and there's nothing we need to worry about, so that we don't make a 2 to 3 week issue become a 2 to 3 month issue because it takes a little bit longer for him to recover, or we have some sort of conditioning and compensatory injury when he comes back. So I think week 1 is doubtful for him. I'll be pleasantly surprised if we see him practice in advance of week 1, but don't expect, even if they do try to get him, it's probably going to be a 15 to 20 snap situation in week 1 at best.
Gene, would your analysis of Anthony Miller and Kiki Cutie be greatly different from Metcalf, in the sense that, from the larger fantasy standpoint, there's still players you can stash on your bench because we expect that by the end of September they will be able to contribute at the level we had hoped they would before their preseason injury? Or is there anything about QT or Miller's situation that sets off a little alarm bell to say, I won't be surprised if it's October and we're still saying, when are they going to be full speed?
Well, I don't think we know much about what Anthony Miller's specific injury is. I think that, the assumption would be that he's probably dealing with a high ankle sprain because it's something that's gone on and lasted a little bit longer. There have been some reports in the local media that suggest that Matt Nagy is not necessarily in a hurry to put him back on the field in a situation where he may not understand the offense as well as he could. Maybe that delays his return a little bit, or maybe there's something more with the ankle that we're not aware of that would be a 6 to 8 week situation rather than a 3 to 4 week situation. I think, we kind of went through this with Kuti and his hamstring injury last year, where, the Texans kind of wanted him held out until he was fully recovered and not at high risk of aggravation. I think we may see some of that as well. But both of these injuries seem like the recovery timetable put him right up against week 1. So again, unless we're pleasantly surprised and we see a full Wednesday practice participation here in 10 days, both of these guys you'd consider doubtful for the first week of the season. I think Miller is, and maybe only because we don't know what's going on. I was about to say that you feel like maybe Miller's a little bit closer than Kuti, but it's probably just guesswork to say that. So no, again, with these players in particular, you hope that they're given enough time to recover, so we don't start week 1 behind the 8 ball, so to speak, and already at risk of pushing through an injury that they're probably trying to get back on the field too soon with. The longer they take to recover, the sooner the sooner the team allows them to get to full participation. In other words, let's not limited practice them for a couple of weeks, give them 20 or 30 snaps in the game, and then not have them really ready to go until 4 to 6 weeks into the regular season. Let these guys recover, get them to a full practice and a full week of preparation, and hopefully that means then that the risk of aggravation is small, and then we can put this behind these players pretty early in the season. And whether or not that's possible with the type of injuries they have, we're not going to know just yet.
So for those still, living in 2008, 2009, any hope for Demaryius Thomas?
Maybe. We've seen players of his age and playing style recover successfully from Achilles tears in the past. He was a younger man, obviously, the last time he went through this, but Michael Crabtree was not young when he recovered, and in some ways, those players are now similar. They're not downfield burners. They're looking to win with body positioning and veteran savvy, and hopefully, I know it's been an issue with Demaryius Thomas in his hands in the past, but hopefully just veteran consistency. you didn't really like what you were hearing through the offseason. It's a little bit unusual for him to come off the PUP list before you might really be expecting him to be at full strength. But the Patriots and the medical staff are one of those teams where we know they take a little bit extra time to bring players off and make sure that they're recovered before they clear him to go. So I think it's a good sign that he's off the PUP list. And this is happening when they've got other players there that are healthy. Edelman's come off the PUP list. They've got Josh Gordon back reinstated. They've got a number of running backs there that are seemingly, although Sony Michel has been a little bit dinged up and looking healthier, and Damian Harris was a little bit dinged up and now looking healthier. There's lots of options there. So it doesn't seem to be a reason to rush Demaryius Thomas off the PUP list and close down options without them saying, we'd like to have him ready for week 1. We're going to use these next week and a half to see how ready he is. And we fully expect him to be operational in some component well in advance of week 6 when it would be his first opportunity to play if they did keep him on the PUP list. So I don't, it's hard to feel optimistic that he's going to be as productive as he was before this second Achilles injury. But so far, it seems like the Patriots are pretty comfortable with bringing him off. So we'll be optimistic as well.
Gene, let's do one more round. Sigmund Bloom here filling in for Cecil Lammey on assignment, hosting, but always with good Dr. Jene Bramel. And the Wild Man is back. We got drafts coming up this weekend, a lot of stuff going on. Remember, football guys, folks, we've got you covered. Mobile Draft Automator free, newsletter free, the Audible free, and if you need more, we've got more. Subscribe. Like more Dr. Jene, the gut check, injury rounds from the gut check from Matt Waldman. Okay, for two-part question, and I want to hinge off somebody in the chat room is asking this too. One, I think I know the answer to, but I want to get your confirmation. And the other, I want to open up for you. Can we sound the all clear horn for Keenan Allen? And what about then do we transfer our worry to Mike Evans?
I don't think I'm going to worry too much about Mike Evans yet. He's another one of those veteran players where, the alarm bells and the flags definitely go up if we don't start to see him do much more in the next week or so. And what was the other one? I got confused.
Keenan Allen.
Yeah. We talked about this internally a little bit. There was, Anthony Lynn sort of, it almost read to me like a throwaway comment where he said, well, we don't think he's going to have surgery. We want to rehab it first, suggesting that his injury was of the type that there's a chance if it didn't rehab well, that he would struggle. But that really wasn't picked up on much. Adam Schefter from the beginning said this was, although it was an injury that was going to keep a player out of the preseason, there was every expectation that Allen would be ready for week 1. We saw Allen get back on the practice field, catching some passes. He wasn't doing a ton in practice this week, but, there was no concern about him being in a walking boot and immobilized. There were no conversations about him needing to see a specialist to have a conversation about next steps. We don't know what the ankle injury was specifically, but it wasn't something that kept him, even out of individual drills for longer than a week or so. So I'm expecting him to be ready for week 1. And I haven't heard enough about Mike Evans to suggest that there's something else going on with him that could prevent him from fully practicing the week after next and being ready to go.
So let's switch over to the dynasty angle here. Hakeem Butler suffers an avulsion fracture in his hand. So what is an avulsion fracture and what can we expect in terms of his injury timeline?
Yeah, an avulsion fracture is when the tendon generally pulls a small piece of bone off of an area. It's generally near the joint because that's where tendons will insert a little bit. It's just a different way to describe a different type of fracture without knowing where it is and how significant it is and whether or not it was something that was displaced enough to require pinning. It's hard to guess. It sounds like, I think, did I read that they were planning that, the expectation was injured reserve?
Yeah.
Yes.
That was the case. So, that suggests that it's probably something that they want to allow to make certain that it heals so that finger or hand or what have you, there's not any residual deformities. And didn't seem like he was, seizing any big opportunities in camp anyway, and maybe makes sense for him to rehab fully and continue to assimilate himself into the offense because they have so many other options there. And now with Michael Crabtree signed, there's definitely no rush there necessarily. So from a dynasty angle, it's probably not a long-term issue at all. I don't know that we can call this a lost season necessarily, but he's not eligible to return for 8 weeks, assuming they do put him on injured reserve after they set their final 53. So, a lot of that will depend on what the rest of the wide receiver room looks like as we get into the middle of the season, into the end of October, but probably not a long-term concern, but I don't know that we're going to get much from him this year.
we are going to get a lot from Dr. Gene this year. Every Thursday night on the Audible, you got your Monday injury rounds. And really, just as was described by Brandon Standiford, I know it doesn't make you say crap, Gene, but when you hear there's an injury or see an injury, you know we're going to count on you, and you're there for us.
Well, that's the no whammies part of this today. Is just,
Right.
we feel like I get the sense that at this time of year, everybody is pressing their luck a little bit. And how many snaps can we get out of these guys before we cross the threshold of, okay, we've hit enough to be ready for the regular season. But, we saw it with Avery Williamson, Adam Gase saying,
he was out there for like 40
maybe
snaps or
maybe
something.
I left him in there too long, that sort of stuff. So, at what point, which snap is one too many? So that's what I kind of feel like. I don't think anybody's got the cheat code like that guy did for pressure luck a few years ago. But yeah, I'm always happy when I don't see the words injury come across my timeline.
Well, we're always happy when we see your name come across our timeline, Dr. Gene. And
how long have we known each other? I am continually
yeah.
amazed that the very last thing any of us say, you always work into a nice little smooth segue.
Cecil taught me. Cecil would go, that's what we call segue in the industry. Nah, it's wonderful, man.
You're trying to figure out how to get me to cry on the couch. I think my new goal is going to be to try to find a way to throw something in my last comment that you cannot use as a segue.
Oh,
vomit in the trash can.
Now the plot thickens. Yeah. No, it's great, Doc. Thank you so much for doing something that sometimes is very with this Colts. We've hit a new frontier with Antonio Brown and the Colts and Andrew Luck this offseason. And
what a weird preseason.
Yeah.
This is not is such and such going to recover from an ACL? Where we're worried about the recovery, that sort of stuff. It's frostbitten feet and who knows what's going on with an ankle and one thing to the next. And there's not really been too much that's been straightforward. Hopefully we get a lot more clarity.
And watch this
next week.
We always know what's going on because of Dr. G. So thank you, Doc. Sincerely, I enjoyed the time we get to spend together, and I still depend on you as much as everybody else asking questions. So thank you.
Oh, I appreciate it. We'll see you guys next week. See you.
All right. Well, now we get to extend the couch. Really.
Pretty much.
It's fun, and it's been a fun week, folks. If you don't know, can you introduce us to our third?
This is Chandler's cat. This is Minx. And he's Bob Harris's cat, Ming, in training.
Exactly. I was going to say, because Minx met Ming. Yeah.
Orange tabbies tend to gain weight. And fortunately, I've got a little black and white one that's also his little brother that runs him ragged. So he's come in here for a break because he's tired of getting chased up and down the stairs and through every little place he wants to sit. So I'm giving him a little respite right now. We can call him Andy Reid, like little Andy Reid. Mm-hmm. There we go.
Does he like snow cones? No, it's I love cats being part of the show. I don't even know how many cats we've had appear on the show now. At least 4 or 5 or 6.
At least, yeah.
It's fun, and we don't have Minx doesn't give us any indicators yet like Zook used to, but we're watching closely. We're watching everything closely. I guess one of the places I want to start, Matt, is yet again they're calling him Danny Dimes, Daniel Jones.
Yeah,
is playing well. Is what we've seen from him this preseason meaningful, and have you changed your range of outcomes for him or fixed it a little more than we did based on what we saw at Duke?
No, because he's doing exactly what he did well at Duke. If you ask me, when he has time, he completes passes. When he plays against vanilla defensive structures, he's going to find the open man. He's a smart, tough quarterback, and he's showing that intelligence and that accuracy when there's time and when he can go to his first read. And a lot of the plays where I've watched him, are either plays where he can get rid of the ball quickly in terms of screen plays and quick little passes in the flat, or he can recognize a quickly set up and recognize the first read on a deeper route. And he hits that, but it's generally area code accuracy. He's had a couple of really nice passes that have been a little bit more than that, but they're passes where they give the wide receiver a little bit more room for error to be able to go up and win the ball and let the cornerback go run the play. When he has to come off that first read and go to his second or third read, he seems to get hit and lose the ball. I've seen that at least in this game, in the Bears game, where he's just not quite seeing that, prepared for that second read and what to do and anticipate what he needs to do in the pocket when that first read doesn't come open. So, I'm waiting still for proof for things that he didn't show up well on the scouting report for him to overcome. And the preseason hasn't really offered that for him to display it. So relative to Eli Manning, the fact that Eli Manning's a starter, the fact that he's playing well in camp and putting himself in a position to be able to at least get a chance to be the second quarterback, that's success. That's a good thing for him. Now, if we were saying, is he in a position to overtake Aaron Rodgers if he was in Green Bay, or if Eli Manning gets hurt and he was really supposed to be the starting quarterback, I think the tone of this conversation would be different with more astute people watching this. But I think at the same time, there's reason to be excited about him to what the extent of it is. But if I'm looking deeply at his game, the preseason hasn't shown enough when you look at it. I mean, hitting some deep passes that are back shoulder fades, that are giving that are underthrown, doing it under pressure. That's great. He's shown that, but it's just not, it's the integrative aspects of the game that elevate quarterbacks to that next tier of being the starter. He hasn't had an opportunity to show, so I can't really answer that and say, yeah, he's ready.
Yeah, and that's good framing of how to get meaningful things or understand what's meaningful, what's not meaningful. Okay, we saw Darius Geis return to action.
Yeah.
Okay, Trent Williams not there, not going to be there. Okay, he's not going to play. I don't think he's going to play another down for Washington. We've got Case Keenum probably week 1, but Darius Geis is still a guy that we ranked. I mean, I don't know how often you do something like RSP rankings over the last 3 years or 5 years. But Darius Geis was a player that checked a lot of boxes in the RSP, yes.
Oh, absolutely. He was certainly one of the top guys.
Yeah. So yet, Matt, when I'm putting together my rankings at running back, because they've got Adrian Peterson, they've got Chris Thompson, and it's probably a bottom 5 offense. Let's be fair, okay? I can't bring myself to say, I would take Geis over Darwin Thompson, or I would take Geis over Justice Hill. I would take Geis over Tony Pollard. Maybe even Justin Jackson at this point, because I'm just trying to, as good as Geis is, figure out a way that he's going to have some sort of sustained impact that we would ever trust him or recommend him in a lineup. And I can't. Am I the wet blanket here? Can you cheer me up, or do you generally agree?
I think we can hang this blanket out on a rope, with some clothespins for a few hours, and it'll dry out in a nice sunny day. But that sunny day is going to need, basically Chase Roulier to stay healthy at center, Brandon Scherf to continue to do what he can do, Morgan Moses playing decently, and somewhere Eric Flowers to surprise us, and then we're
for
not
the
even
first
getting
time.
And then we're not even getting to whether Donald Penn's young enough to still be able to play at a decent level, or whether Jerron Christian is an answer. But we'll say this, I look at it this way. If you think Adrian Peterson played pretty darn well with a tattered offensive line last year that had a lot of different injuries, but when they were intact, there's some impressive stuff that goes on there with Roulier being able to pull kind of like Jason Kelsey does. And there's some skills there. The problem is that I look at Adrian Peterson and, I joke that, we joke about his unfortunate financial circumstances that he's gotten himself into, but, he's always run like the light bill's about to go out. So, the light bill's due, and that he's or overdue, and that he'd better get paid today and better do some good work today to be able to make sure that the lights are still on when he comes home. And I think that he's still running like that. So if they're giving a fair competition and we see Geis beat out Peterson, that's a great sign. And what Peterson can do with a limited offensive line, I think still gives us an opportunity to look at and say, you're a decent flex play. It's just that you're drafting to value rather than drafting to profit. And I think that that's the difference with these guys.
So bottom line, if Geis is there in the 10th round, 11th round, are you thinking, yeah, or, do you have your pet players in your back pocket that you want to make sure you get?
Yeah, good follow-up question, because in theory the answer is yes. In practice, I haven't drafted Geis once.
Yeah, and we'll see how far he falls.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a good player. And if
Yeah.
Darius Geis has a good fantasy season and is a value for people who stuck by him, good for you for sticking by him. Because if you just go through a fantasy draft and say, I just want to get guys I know are good, quote, hashtag good at football, Darius Geis is good at football. So
trade for him in Dynasty for sure.
Right.
He's definitely a guy I want in Dynasty. But
yeah,
right now, I just want another year to see what goes on with this mess that's in Washington.
Right now, I want to draft the Philly defense playing Washington week 1 in Philadelphia.
Right.
That's what I want. Give me, we talked about this on the phone, and I talked about this with Evan Silva today. The Darwin Thompson thing. We went over this in depth on the couch, and Matt did an incredibly detailed breakdown of the Kansas City backfield for a gut check, right?
Right.
So if you have any questions about the Kansas City backfield, Matt has anticipated them. But give me another player or two that you're excited about, maybe even aware that to everybody else you will seem irrationally excited about, but you are excited nonetheless.
Deion Kane, because I liked him last year, and I watched him in the preseason this past weekend, and he got a little bit more of that confidence back. And just watching, he had one play that I really would have liked to seen him make, which was a dig route at the end of the half that went through his hands in tight coverage. But he showed really nice skill in terms of, apparently my cat doesn't like Deion Kane, so I'm going to let him out of the door because he's disagreeing with me.
Right.
And I think he's more of a Titans fan than a Colts fan. So there we go.
He wants to hear something about the Panthers, the Lions.
Jaguars. Yes. Yeah, he might be a Jaguars fan. You're right. So, Deion Kane's route running, his quickness, he's smooth, fluid. He's a guy that also can play multiple positions for you in theory. And I just look at this team and, we love Paris Campbell and what he might be able to do once he gets healthy. But he seems like, this hamstring's been kind of an issue and might remain an issue this year. If he tries too hard like rookies do to come back too early. Then you have Devin Funchess, who I think we all see the ceiling to his game. And we all see where he could remove that ceiling if he were just a little more skilled or could figure it out himself and see that there's a big skylight above there for him to even access more room. But he hasn't figured out how to remove that ceiling in his own game. And I think that he's the type of guy that if he struggles early and loses confidence, I could see Deion Kane getting more and more opportunities. So that's a guy that I like, and I'm certainly excited about when I look at his game. I think also that we have to consider, some guys like, I think when it comes to, say, I talk about A.J. Brown. I think A.J. Brown, but I want to mention him again. I just really think that I watch the way, I've spent thousands of hours watching tape at this point, okay? And certainly if there's some level of intuition that you're going to get from spending that much time in front of a screen watching just 4 positions and studying them as intently as I do, you start to understand why some coach might say, like Dave Wanstead said, hey, after I watched 2 plays of Deion Lewis in high school, I offered him a scholarship. Like, I get that now. I mean, I laughed about it before.
Intuition, right?
But it's the intuition. After a while, intuition is based on thousands of hours of witnessing something, and you're able to process it a little faster. And when I watch A.J. Brown move as a player, he just knows what he's doing. Yeah. I mean, it's
why I wanted the Patriots to take him instead of Harry.
Me too. But without a shadow of a doubt, I agree completely. And the Titans got a steal. And I think that, in comparison for that. And it's watching him come back and barely have any practice and draw a pass interference play with pretty much his only target, and the way he did it. I mean, the hand moves, the quickness, the speed, the ability to drop his weight, and then to get in a position to draw that interference penalty was really strong stuff. So I'm impressed with just how he feels. They said he looked like the best receiver on the field this spring. A guy like Charles Davis, who I really just trust as well as someone who just studies the game, said this guy's going to be an absolute star, and it's going to happen pretty quickly. And I'm actually kind of excited about that because I think that he's that guy that could just show up and turn into being really a strong player right away. Justin Jackson, every time I watch him, it's just it's the same kind of thing. This guy knows how to set up blocks. He knows how to finish in a way that he gets extra yards, but doesn't punish himself while punishing someone else. Like that's a tough skill to teach. You don't say to someone, lower the shoulder and win this. You say lower the shoulder and and win yards after contact, but you don't say lunge into the guy with your pads low so that you bounce off of him and like spin off, but don't really have a ton of recoil off of it because he gets the brunt of the initial contact, but you continue to fall forward for another 3 or 4 yards more than what you would have done if you just lowered the pads. Like he has that, it's those little things, those little movements between techniques and the little flair of things with his techniques that you just look at him and go, I get why he was the feature back at Northwestern for 4 years because of that kind of deal. Divino Zigbo, watching him play in different spurts, I could see him getting a shot to overtake Latavius Murray if Murray starts doing his scarecrow dance as a runner and, looks kind of awkward and ungainly to the point that it's diminishing returns. That's another guy that just kind of concerns me on that level. And then 2 other guys, and this is one of them that really excites me, is Irv Smith Jr. Think about this, Bloom. They're showcasing Laquan Treadwell because basically he hasn't done anything. You can add him as a receiver that I had at the top of my list who hasn't done well either. He and Dorial Green-Beckham should, join in that. But you have Laquan Treadwell being showcased. Chad Beebe, he's a slot receiver. He's an aspiring Danny Amendola or Jairus Wright at best. Okay. Jordan Taylor, we know what he is. He's basically
he may not even make the team, by the way.
Exactly.
BC Johnson is ahead of him right now, maybe.
Yes. And BC Johnson's versatile, and that's nice. And maybe he gets the day there. But I'm watching Irv Smith get split outside and watching him run routes like a wide receiver, wearing a wide receiver number 84 in Minnesota. And he's looking fluid, and he looks like a wide receiver in the slot. He's getting open easily. He's been able to work downfield and stretch the field. He's playing in a Gary Kubiak offense that, it's been a while since Gary Kubiak in any offensive capacity has fielded a fantasy tight end of worth. We have to go back to like Owen Daniels for that to actually be the case. And that was when Owen Daniels was healthy for like the 1.5 seasons that he was. So, you look back at that and go, whatever, but they liked the 2 tight end set in Houston. They like running 2 tight ends for a lot of reasons. And they talk about going back to the run game. So why not do more 12 personnel where you got Kyle Rudolph, in line, and then you can split Irv Smith out. But then as conveniently, you can also have him blocked because the Vikings are saying he surprised us with how good of a blocker he was, even for his size. And so I like this whole Irv Smith thing and the idea of him being that option where he might really surprise us in this, as a guy that we pick up off the waiver wire because of what he might be able to deliver as that second tight end who's really more of a slot receiver.
And it's a good offense for tight ends. And what I take out of that is I have seen some people make a strong case for Kyle Rudolph. I'm just not seeing it. And if Irv Smith is ready to do a lot as a rookie, then that makes it even easier to just kind of brush that aside, even though this is a good offense for tight ends based on its historical, distribution. The Titans thing in A.J. Brown, I think you're right. I mean, he's got skills that fit in. If we're evaluating, I talk about how we evaluate quarterbacks outside of structure, but we don't evaluate wide receivers outside of structure as much. If we were evaluating A.J. Brown outside of structure, I was thinking of Juju when I was watching him, like just a armored car version of Juju, but it's just Mariota. There's nothing coming out of Tennessee that's making me think you're going to see, because he's healthy now, this different Marcus Mariota.
But here's the counter argument about this. One is while I keep making fun of myself for guys like Hakeem Butler and Dorial Green-Beckham and Laquan Treadwell, I will say that 2 of the highest graded of the 3 receivers that I've graded in the past 5 years are Miles Boykin and A.J. Brown. So just to give you a little saving grace there to point that out. But here's the thing. Who's the receiver who had the most success with the 2 quarterbacks on the Titans and that's Rashad Matthews.
Yeah.
When he was healthy, and it wasn't amazing stats, but it was fantasy worthy, and it was strong wide receiver 2 worthy. I'd say AJ Brown's better than Rashad Matthews right now.
Sure. Rashard Matthews. By the way, did you see Rashard Matthews, his notes about leaving? It was interesting. It was just interesting. And, I'll look this up and bring it up because we like to go on these flights of fancy on the show, and we'd like to keep the human side of it. Let me find it. By the way, while I'm looking that up, have you ever heard of Valerio? Because we were talking about the Jaguars. Have you ever heard of Valerio the Jaguar?
I've heard of Valerio the gas station.
So yeah,
and it's the color of the Jaguars.
So he's a Jaguar down here at the Audubon Zoo. They all ask for you. And he last summer broke out of his enclosure and killed 9 animals. He killed 5 alpacas, an emu, and 3 foxes.
Wow!
And they just reinforced his little pen and put him back. So he's a baller. He's a real baller.
Okay.
So something for minks and all the other cats of the world to strive for. He talked about, so Rashard Matthews, very interesting, talked about, he did a post on Instagram where he talked about all these things that no longer exist in his life, like beating up your body over and over again for groups of people to give a small percentage of their earnings that they don't even need, and hours away from family, the brainwashing and dividing culture for a small piece of jewelry, being around too much ego to even understand that someone has the same skin as you. It was interesting.
And it's funny because we could talk about that and say it applies to any profession where you have to be obsessive about the level of work and productivity that you have to put into it. And there are a lot of positions like that out in the world. So I admire him for at least understanding it's time to step away and recognizing what it is he's been missing. But I think, like any profession, just to defend football a little bit here on this end, is that, it certainly has its problems and there's a lot with that. But a lot of work cultures, I think, also we can get promoted into doing that. So it's something that you just have to have a healthy sense of self. And when you're in your early to mid 20s, sometimes you're learning still who you're supposed to be and what's best for you.
Absolutely. I just thought it was fascinating. Most of the time players don't go that quietly whenever they retire and maybe prematurely retire. So I think AJ Brown and Deion Kane's a great one to bring up too, just because they're thrilled that he's back. He's playing well. Devin Funchess is just the kind of guy who's ripe for being overtaken. That's just fun. And with Campbell, as you brought up with the hamstring.
Can I give you one more?
Please.
I'll just put this out here. Nate Washington. Listen.
You mean James Washington?
James Washington.
Nate Washington tipping. We're going back to Division 3.
Yeah, we are going to.
He got some big money from the
country.
Titans. Didn't he get the big money from the Titans? I think.
Yes,
at the time, it felt like big money.
It did for him, but it's James Washington. Excuse me, James Washington. Listen, man, this guy, he may be behind Juju Smith-Schuster as the flanker number 2, but we know Juju Smith-Schuster is going to play a lot of time in the slot. And when you get James Washington, where he doesn't have to win against press, playing in as a flanker, a little bit off the line, that's just the goods right there. I just think that, I know Dante Moncrief's going to start, and Dante Moncrief's going to fumble, and he's going to drop passes, and he's going to run the wrong route, and he's not going to be in great position. And there's always going to be a reason why Dante Moncrief almost was there. And I just think that James Washington is already there. And I think that this is a guy that could be, has a lot more ceiling than his roster designation on the depth chart points out.
That's fair. I mean, it's the second half of your draft. And I was going to say was Kane, Brown, and these are more the types of players. You brought up Ozigbo. These are early waiver wire watch players.
Yes.
Which is important. Which is really important. Like, be aware. Be aware that
Juwan Winfrey.
Yeah, Juwan Winfrey in Denver, especially if Cortland Sutton starts slow. But you mentioned Miles Boykin. And he's not somebody, I hope, just for the quality of your leagues out there, that Miles Boykin is drafted in every league. He should be drafted in every league. We spend a lot of time on priority rookie running backs because they just tend to hit more and they show out faster generally than wide receivers. And rookie wide receivers have been disappointing mostly for the last 4 or 5 years. Boykin has a chance to not be disappointing and to be one of those hits. How high of a priority should he be, Matt? Are you willing to reach for him 11th, 12th round? Is he one of your priority bench players after what we've seen from him and from his quarterback who did not play tonight?
Yeah, I've been able to get him between really the 13th to 16th rounds most of the time. So I'm okay with, but I could see going, somewhere in that range to get him and feel good about it. He's just someone that I guess I said this in my recent article. I just laugh every time someone says that he was raw coming out of school as a route runner. This is a guy that dropped a lot of passes his junior year or the year before his draft year because he was playing with broken fingers. So he was trying to catch ball with broken fingers and it didn't work out quite that well. But last year he played really well and caught the ball consistently strong, and he's very good in and out of his routes. I would kind of look at him, and when you look at his athletic ability, I mean, he was the winner of the combine. He really was. And when you look at the metrics, metrics-wise, you might as well say, I mean, I know that the metrics people are going to quibble because I'm not being exact here, but there's kind of a vibe of Josh Gordon meets Terrell Owens with this kid in terms of what he's capable of doing, and we haven't really seen him fully open it up yet. And I think when we do, people are going to look and go, why were we talking about DK Metcalf? I mean, I like DK Metcalf and think he can be good, but people are going to look at that and go, wow, all this hype for Metcalf and none of it for Boykin. And right. I just think, and we have to understand that although Lamar Jackson gets a lot of hate because, look at how bad his completion percentage was, he's not very accurate. Well, he wasn't very accurate for a couple of reasons. One is that while the offensive line was prepared for Lamar Jackson because they practiced how to run those option plays with the timing they needed and the type of blocking that they were going to use under Flacco wasn't running the option-oriented plays and the option reads in the passing game. So the receivers had to make adjustments with Lamar Jackson last year in terms of the switch over because Jackson wasn't practicing with them for most of the spring, summer, and fall until he came in halfway through the season. So the timing wasn't going to be on, in addition to all the things that rookies have to adjust to. So that was a problem. And now we're getting new receivers. So that's going to be an issue. And guess where timing routes are or guess what happens in terms of when timing being off the most? It's going to be those timing routes on the perimeter where his completion percentage is the worst. So, who also has a bad completion percentage or isn't very good on timing routes on the perimeter game? Deshaun Watson. And if you take Deshaun Watson and give him routes like deep crossers, deep posts, and corner routes where he can let the receiver run under the ball, he does pretty darn well. Force him to run those, those comebackers, deep curls and the out routes. That's where it's basically like, if we can make you do this, we're gonna get the Houston Texans offense off the field. Usually happens that way. Same thing with Lamar Jackson, I think, to an extent. So if Greg Roman is going to institute an offense that we haven't really seen, I bet he's borrowing from Bill O'Brien to an extent with what they did with Deshaun Watson, and we're going to see an increased completion percentage to some of his receivers like Malcolm Brown and Boykin, who can run under passes when you just let them buy time across the field and just outrun people and not have to win with the physical play, but just run under it, and the ball's going to be dropped right there. And trust me, Boy can be physical if he needs to be to win at the catch point. So I'm excited about that enough to look at, as you can be, about a rookie wide receiver in a new offense. But I'm excited about it enough to look at him somewhere between rounds 13 and 15.
Well, he's just one of those guys that you want to have the early reveal on. You want to just have him on your roster for the first few games because, and this is what I always point out, and this is why Lamar Jackson is the quarterback to take if you're waiting for 10 quarterbacks to be gone to take your starter. Miami, Arizona, Kansas City. Those are Arizona, they lost Robert Alford. I mean, so they're down their top two corners now. Miami has Xavier Howard, and Xavier Howard versus Miles Boykin. Maybe I won't march Miles Boykin out that first game. Maybe that's more of a Mark Andrews game, or Hayden Hurst. But then that Kansas City game, everyone's going to be on Miles Boykin. By then, if Boykin's playing well, everyone will be on him for sure. Yeah, go ahead.
Can I give you my absolute craziest thing that I've felt this way all season about, and no one's going to follow my advice with it, and that's okay. I'm going to do it though.
Good.
I'm waiting on Matthew Stafford. Okay. Like everybody I know everybody's like, he's done. He's bad. Matt Patricia, horrible coach. He's just a Bill Belichick clone who can't do what Bill Belichick does. Line's never great. They got injured. They don't even have a third receiver that they feel great about at this point, or more depth on their depth chart. Fine, whatever. There's only been 2 seasons that Matthew Stafford hasn't been a top 10 fantasy quarterback. And when you look at the schedule, Arizona, are you kidding me? That's a great matchup. The Chargers without Derwin James and their weakness in the passing game. Philadelphia, who's up and down. Kansas City, those are 4 games right there where Matthew Stafford could ball out, and they're giving him rest this year because they realize that, he might be the closest thing to like Steve McNair in terms of like toughness that we have at the quarterback position right now in recent memory. And then after a Green Bay divisional game and Minnesota divisional game, that'll be tough. It's the Giants, the Raiders. Yeah, the Bears will be a little bit of speed bump, but Dallas is always kind of open as a defense. Washington, and you have Tampa and Denver in weeks 15 and 16. And Denver's kind of that team that can be exploited for big plays. It's just an interesting schedule for me where he could have a really hot start. And if that offense does build momentum and play well, and that defense, a top 10 caliber defense that people project, we might be looking at one of those top 6, top 7 years for Stafford that we've seen on occasion.
Yeah, I love that you're looking at schedule. I'm doing updates of all my tiers and top 250 and things like that. And one of the things I'm adding in the update, Matt, is early schedule, because I think we have enough of a feel for these teams now that we can look at things. Like I'll give you a for instance. Okay, a for instance. Let me see. The first 3 games for Aaron Rodgers and Matt LaFleur. You ready? At Chicago, then Minnesota comes to Lambeau, and then Denver. So we're going to know. Because we know that Aaron Rodgers, his trademark was even when teams were corralling him and making life hard on him, he was finding a way. Well, those are 3 defenses that are going to make life hard on him, including the marquee game on Thursday night. But then, as you were talking about, it's those runs, those early runs. I've hammered that Baltimore one. It's those early runs that make us really excited that we also want to target. One of those I see is San Francisco, starting with Tampa Bay and Cincinnati. So even if Jimmy Garoppolo is really a pretender, well, maybe not after those first 2 games will it be so obvious. James Conner, and by the way, I've come all the way around on James Conner. James Conner is a fine first-round pick. Ed Bouchette said, not a committee. They rest him a little bit because Jalen Samuels looks good, like 70% of the carries. Hey, if he's getting 70% of the carries, he's worth a first-round pick, and he looks so good. But the Steelers start with the Patriots, but then listen to this. Seattle, San Francisco, and Cincinnati. I mean, these are all run defenses to exploit, I think, defenses in general.
What about San Francisco?
Well, okay, right. That Tampa and Cincinnati. Does that make you like Tevin Coleman, or we like Matt Breida, right? So you're very much. You might have even said this on the show because it all runs together after I did 5 couches this week. Right. Someone else, I think Evan said this today. Like Breida may well be better. I think actually, if you watch Breida and Coleman, maybe the logical or objective outcome is that Breida is better based on what we've seen so far.
He is. I mean, Coleman's a more athletic player to an extent. But not in the way that you want to be actionable as a running back. And Coleman's that huge play kind of difference maker that scares the water out of defensive linebacker or defensive coaches because of the possibility of the big play in the open field. But Matt Breida is like Devonta Freeman in the sense that he can create so well, and he's a little quicker. He's actually a little quicker and more sudden than Freeman is. He's just not quite as nuanced and powerful, but he's a tough dude. And he's a guy that, they talk about Raheem Mostert, and maybe they'll put him in as well. And that can be the fear, is that Mostert takes over and they maintain the 3-headed minion backfield, or they just decide, you know what, we like Breida, let's go for it and give him all the opportunities we need here. And we've got Coleman here if we need him. We'll use him in certain situations like we've always used him. But Breida can get that Devonta Freeman possibility. And if he has that type of upside, suddenly we're looking at him and with a good offense and go, wow, he might be a surprisingly good top 15 running back.
Yeah, I like him in that same range as I think he's prioritized Darwin Thompson and Justice Hill. And I know Justice Hill played a lot tonight, even though the starters didn't, and they will make hay of that. I see Justice Hill doing something on offense that makes them change their plans.
Did you see Rodney Anderson?
Yeah, he got a lot of great receptions in that game, right? Just that he's healthy enough to be on the field is terrific. I don't know where the path to value for fantasy football is for him, unless somebody please trade for Johnny Bernard, like Tampa, trade for Giovanni Bernard.
Yeah.
Then maybe we're talking, but eventually down the line, Anderson and Mixon back together, right?
Yeah.
There you go, reproducing. They only use Baker Mayfield, and then they get Lincoln Riley as the head coach, and now we're really CD Lamb. Let's get the whole band back together. It's fun to get the band together, even if Cecil is in some jazz club in the great Birdland or something right now in New York City. Who knows what misadventures he's getting into? We get into our adventures and misadventures. Just a couple of minutes, Matt. I will give you a chance for one more hot take punctuation mark. Give me somebody. Well, I was going to set you up because I'm going to give me somebody that is like your quintessential Matt Waldman. And Eric Stoner told me that Wet Blanket Bloom suits me. I'm not sure how to feel about that. so give me your quintessential. This is another chance for me to brag about. Yeah, Eric Stoner. Now I text, because he's a legend.
Yes,
give me your quintessential Wet Blanket take for 2019 drafts.
Kirk Cousins. Listen, I mean, he's just an old standby for me because, I mean, I think part of it is that his game always looks great on paper, and he always shows well in certain instances, but his consistency is awful. Like if you look at consistency of production, way back in the day before Football Guys at FF Today, I wrote about this thing called player consistency, and I came up with a consistency score called the Crank Score. But the bigger thing wasn't the Crank Score as much as tracking how many quality games were actually delivered. And the way I did it was a little bit different than most because I calculated the average performance of these players during that year and set baselines for running back 1, running back 2, flex play. And so you could kind of customize it towards your league. And you knew what percentage of games were subpar below that starter tiers for your lineup likes. And when you look at, Kirk Cousins, he may have been a top 10 quarterback last year, but I think he was 19th overall in consistency. So he's a guy that, are you really getting the value from him weekly that you should? I don't think so. And then when you look at the past 3 years and look at his value, you realize that he's a guy that at the end of the season, like from week 12 on, he's awful. Do you really want an inconsistent quarterback during the season and then a guy who basically can't give you what he's supposed to give you during the playoffs? And that's the past 3 years with 2 different teams. He's driven down Stephon Diggs' value. Adam Thielen has some value with that, but I just look at him and I think, there are some guys. It's like Mitchell Trubisky's this way. It's a guy that they look good for the cover your ass, GM way of hiring quarterbacks. But when it comes to crunch time, when it comes to making the difficult plays that elevate you or facing defenses that have found a solution for you, can you answer it? And can you make the decisions that are good decisions and not have excuses? And the answer for Kirk Cousins right now is no, even though, and then the fact to me that he kind of gets upset when he reads his news clippings about it and has to go, I showed you when I had one good game, in Washington where I came back and showed it. I mean, good for you. And I want, I'm kind of talking trash about it to an extent, but it's why does he care about what I have to say or anybody else who's getting on his case? He's got a job to do. He should be close, kind of Xing out the media in the first place. And the fact that he's letting it bother him to the extent that he did, I mean, why did Washington get rid of him? And why did some of the veteran players say, we finally got a real quarterback with Alex Smith? Alex Smith.
Yeah, it's a good question. And this is, I'm having deja vu, Matt. I think this has been an ongoing storyline with Kirk Cousins, and we've talked about him. And I just think from a fantasy perspective, there are better choices even in that 15 to 20 range. Like you said, even Jimmy Garoppolo, just to see if he starts hot against those two weak defenses. If I have to start, although Minnesota plays Atlanta week 1, Atlanta's defense will be good. So very quick, brief, it can even be a one-word answer, but I got to touch on it to show that we're hip, we're in touch as before we sign off, because I'm in New Orleans, and New Orleans East is where Popeye started. Okay. You, sir, are in, well, the Atlanta metro area, right?
Mhm.
And Chick-fil-A is in their headquarters is in College Park, Georgia.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you've caught wind of all this, but
yes, I've met
Popeyes versus Chick-fil-A. Make the call.
Okay. I have to give you a little more than one answer.
Okay.
If it's the original Popeyes in New Orleans, hands down Popeyes.
Especially during Mardi Gras. If you can sit down at a Mardi Gras parade route and eat it, yes.
Popeyes, no contest, okay? But if you're going to say store-to-store quality and consistency, then Chick-fil-A. But if you're looking for the idea of what fried chicken should be and you hit the right store, it's Popeyes. And Popeyes is worth going to visit to see if that's the case, because you can always go to Chick-fil-A later.
You should see, Matt. I recommend you look up stuff like Shannon Sharp. And they were doing like a marching band one, like Chick-fil-A. I think Clarence Hill Jr., who covers the Cowboys, put a good thing out about trying to compare, like, this is Chick-fil-A and this is Popeyes. And now that I live down in New Orleans, I understand how intense it is.
It should be no contest. I don't understand, because, like, to be honest, the only problem with Popeyes is the store to store. Like, you get Popeyes up here, and some stores you're just like, it's awful. You never want to go. But like the idea of Popeyes, when it's good, and I'm sure in New Orleans it's always great. So
in New Orleans they'll do best fried chicken in the city, and there'll be like these wonderful Italian places like Fiorello's, and there's all this great fried chicken like at barbecue joints, and Giacomo's has a great fried chicken. And if they don't put Popeyes in the best fried chicken in New Orleans list, they get complaints. And you'll see a correction that says, it's come to our attention that we did not include Popeyes in our best fried chicken list, and we apologize.
Let's just be real about this for a minute, okay?
Yeah.
I'm an Atlanta area native since 1980. I like Chick-fil-A. But Chick-fil-A is not really a fried chicken place. That's like suburban faux, like BS kind of, like, I don't know. It's not even, how do you even call it a fried chicken joint? It's like a mall mother's soccer mom, dad
look up the
bod
Clarence
place,
Hill thing. You're going to love the Clarence Hill Jr. thing. You're going to love it. Okay. So, now we're really venturing onto the podcast we want to do, and then we're going overtime, but this was worth it. It's captivated the world, this fried chicken sandwich battle.
I'm surprised. I'm just shocked.
That alone and of itself says volumes. Everything we do here says volumes. Thanks to Dr. Jene. Thanks to Cecil. Thanks to all you beautiful people. Over 100. The number is going up, Matt. We're going overtime and talking fried chicken sandwiches, and now we're over 100.
Yeah, if we can get to like Hattie B's and like Gus's fried chicken versus
Prince's,
Popeyes, now you're talking a real fight.
But if you're in Nashville,
it's like heavyweight versus middleweight. You don't put Chick-fil-A in that.
It's like Hulk Hogan. It's what was he, Thunderlips against Rocky Balboa. That's what we're talking about here. Well, you know who the Hulk is dispensing the takes. Matt Waldman. That one's for Jene Bramel. Oh, these are all for you, our classy people. Thank you. Got to click twice to end broadcast. Got to make sure you ended it